Our group chose to evaluate the volunteer program of the organization, the Association of Persons Affected by Addiction. Our group members are Bozen, Bree, Cindy, and Matt. We hope you enjoy. The Association of Persons Affected by Addiction, also known as APAA, received its 501c3 status and began operating independently and entirely a volunteer organization, with a board of directors for leadership. Before 2001, they operated under the nonprofit organization Dallas Helps. APAA's purpose is to provide recovery support services for individuals in or seeking recovery from alcohol or drug addiction. APAA is a leading recovery community support organization that encourages and supports personal recovery by offering non-clinical peer-to-peer assistance that help support recovery, reduce relapse, and promote high-level wellness in individuals and families in the community. Membership for APAA is defined as persons in recovery, friends, family members, and significant others of addicted persons, and other allies interested in the support of their mission. They are a very welcoming group and made it very known they love to have felons as volunteers. A little bit about the volunteer program history. Although APAA began in 2001, there is no oral tradition history at all. We found this very interesting as this was all the volunteer manager could tell us. He stated that people turned their heads and remained silent when asked about the previous volunteer program. We found this odd because the organization states they began with only a volunteer staff, but no information could be given to us regarding the volunteer program between the years of 2001 and 2011. As of 2011, the volunteer manager, Bill, developed the current volunteer program. He had to start from scratch and develop policies and procedures and training. APAA has a total of 155 volunteers with an average of 7 active volunteers monthly. In 2013, over 15,000 hours were contributed to the organization by volunteers. APAA also has a very unique peer recovery coaching program. They provide training sessions to become a peer recovery coach. Peer recovery coaches form the connecting tissue between professional systems of care and indigenous communities of recovery. They are specifically trained to assist people in assessing a broad range of support services including education, employment, healthcare, housing, daycare, transportation, and counseling for co-occurring problems. Unlike a sponsor, a peer recovery coach usually works as a volunteer staff member within APAA that is bound by accreditation, licensing, and funding guidelines. Another distinction is that peer recovery coaches start coaching clients before they have formally entered recovery and continue the relationship even in the face of relapse, and check in with clients after they have disengaged from active participation in mutual aid groups.
The main resource APAA provides to volunteers are physical places to be and tens of hours trainings to be more skilled. Also, there is a kitchen done located in APAA Recovery Community Center, so everyone passing could have a free food and coffee. APAA has volunteer policies when doing orientation. However, it seems that APAA has a positive attitude towards the risk, which means they may not have an effective risk evaluation plan. However, APAA claims there were only one incident happens that they have to call the place in the last 3 years. In pre-recruitment, APAA has developed new volunteer positions to attract diverse population. For example, one of the APAA main concerns right now is that to find a bilingual personnel who can truly translate English into Spanish, but it is hard for them to find such a personnel.
Recruitment. Volunteers are recruited via college and university campuses. They utilize the services of the Salvation Army and have paid staff at Green Oak to network and refer clients as well as volunteers to APAA. The volunteer manager schemes during the interview process to match the program needs with the strength of the potential volunteer. Although volunteers are addicts who are able to assist other addicts, they have moved from one location to another successfully and are demonstrating proficiency and saving money. APAA is good at making their funds stretch by actually attaching dollar value to every volunteer hour that is used. They offer a wide range of services such as counseling, mentoring, and peer. They allow people to walk in from the street and immediately get help and assistance that they need. Selection and placement. APAA helps addicts with mental disabilities recover from addiction. It is considered a safe place for recovering addicts by self-enforcement, means that each person is responsible for keeping themselves as well as others around them in a place and environment that is safe and conducive for recovery. They are located immediately across from the DART train station, so they have good access for people to come and receive the assistance that they need. They have mostly daytime hours, and because a majority of their clients and volunteers are felons, they utilize random urinalysis. The volunteer manager customizes sometimes the volunteer position to each person's strength so that you are doing things that are easy for you to do, so the recovery process is easier for you.
In our assessment of APAA's supervision and mentoring program, we have noticed that they have some strong systems in place, but also have some areas for improvement. From what we've read, this is not uncommon amongst nonprofits. APAA's areas of strength revolve around their initial contact, training, and placing volunteers. Once volunteers come on board, they are set up with a supervisor. This helps create a clear path of communication for the volunteer. The volunteers are encouraged to come and ask questions at any time during their period of service. Another strength lies in the initial training of the volunteer. This involves a short formal or informal orientation program administered by APAA. This ensures that the volunteer is properly prepared before he or she starts the position. Matching skill sets to placement is a great best practice that APAA has in place. This diversifies their program and also enables them to get the maximum results out of their volunteer while also setting up the volunteer for success. When a volunteer's natural abilities are matched to a position, there is a quicker learning curve which equals higher productivity. This is not only great for the organization, but a great morale booster for the volunteer as well. This feeds directly into their other best practice of offering a wide array of opportunities. This way, when the initial screening of the volunteer happens and APAA is matching their skills to positions, there are many job descriptions available. Having a diverse number of job descriptions allows for more opportunity for the company. Also, the volunteer program manager mentioned that a volunteer starts off doing very minimal tasks. However, once proven they can move on to more complex projects, this is aligned what we learned in the textbook about graduation from no authority for self-assignment to the upper 3 tiers of volunteer management control. It seems that once the volunteer starts from a strong point in terms of guidance, it drops off from there. The areas of growth that we noticed APAA has to deal with concern ongoing management of the volunteers. One area of improvement for APAA is developing a strong tracking system. It seems that volunteers come and go with no supervised signing in and out. This is essential because an organization needs to know how many volunteer hours are being logged in order to manage projects efficiently. Additionally, it adds a sense of accountability for the volunteer in terms of punctuality and attendance. A volunteer is often given a job, but then there is little on-the-job continual training given. One suggestion is to set up an observation feedback system. This would require the supervisor to spend a certain amount of time observing the volunteer's work directly. Then setting up a short 10 to 15 minute debrief session with the volunteer where they can explain some things they notice the volunteer doing well and some of the things that he or she needs to work on. Tying directly into this idea would be setting up scheduled progress checks. APAA does not have a system in place to assess quality of work during an ongoing project. A suggestion for them could be build scheduled progress check sessions in the calendar. This could be weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly depending on the time length of the project. During this 15 to 20 minute session, the supervisor could see where the volunteer is exactly on the project, give any supporting guidance needed, and then also have the chance for the volunteer to ask any questions. The last thing we noticed is there is not a set evaluation system in place for the volunteers. This is necessary to be able to give the volunteer feedback, move them into a higher or lower role based on performance, reward, discipline, or terminate if needed. It also is important because it gives the organization a baseline of work quality to measure against future volunteers.
Recognizing a volunteer's contribution is very important. Unfortunately, the volunteer program at APAA does not have a system in place for recognizing volunteers' achievements. This is due to a lack of funds per the volunteer manager, but we will discuss more about this in our recommendations section. Records are kept regarding the time and activities that are completed each day. These records are the equivalent of a sign-in sheet, and it does not seem to be very sufficient for reporting purposes. Bill showed us an example of this sheet, and many of the volunteers that signed in did not provide their sign-out time. It was apparent that there was a lack of organization within the system. APAA holds a very welcome and open environment, and the volunteers are always free to speak with the manager about their concerns. This was a positive that we found. We suggested that they use a system online for tracking the hours, duties, and accomplishments of the volunteers. Also, management should provide the volunteers with a formal way of recording feedback that could aid in the organization's growth.
The majority of the people served are African American, with Hispanic moving into the area of quantity. There is a lapse of service. Volunteer program is stable but actively seeking ways in which to reach out to many different races of people. Healthy website make it difficult to keep up with changes in technology.
We found that APAA is working towards keeping up with the changing needs of the volunteer, but still has some work to do. With one look at the APAA website, it is clear that they are a bit behind the times. In a technologically dominated society, this is an absolute must. Navigating through the website proved difficult, which can really mean two things. One is that APAA is not reaching the amount of potential volunteers it could be with a more user-friendly website. Secondly, volunteers are choosy, and if they see something that is not well organized, they're going to assume the organization is not well run operationally. Whether this is true or not is irrelevant because the first impression is made through a computer without any representative's input from the organization. Another area that APAA self-admittedly needs to work on is with the changing surrounding demographics. The volunteer program manager mentioned that more Spanish-speaking individuals are moving into the area. The main concern with this is a lot of the program literature is only in English as of right now. The good thing is that this has been identified as an issue and is easily fixable, but will take time.
Aha!
After 5 years of being sober, going to classes, going through the process of recovering from your addiction, you can, through documentation, through peer mentoring, yourself become a counselor. So that in itself is an aha moment. And there was a time when a recovering addict who was there volunteering, who had been there regularly, had a mental snap for no reason at all, without any pre-warning. And the third would be, finally, just being there and seeing how people with master's degrees are able to go from master's degrees to addict to counselor. That in itself makes for a cycle of people being able to learn from their mistake, do better, be better, rise from the ashes. So that would be an aha moment.
The top 3 recommendations for the program are recognizing volunteers, Transparency and risk management. We believe it is very vital to retaining volunteers to have a way to recognize their achievements and be awarded appropriately. This can be something simple like an award presented during the lunch hour or an email being sent to the entire staff of APAA detailing the volunteers' accomplishments. We have learned throughout our coursework that nonprofits funds are very limited, but there are many inexpensive ways to show appreciation. One of them is to simply welcome the volunteer with a smile and make them feel like they belong. Transparency is also important. Being a nonprofit, it is very important to be as transparent as possible. APAA is not a member of GuideStar, so that is one of the suggestions that we made during our interview. Surprisingly, the volunteer manager had never heard of GuideStar. He took note of it and plans to look into it, so that was comforting. Also, they need to evaluate potential risk when dealing with volunteers. APAA shows no evidence of a risk management plan when dealing with these volunteers. This is important because most of the volunteers are addicts seeking help or who are in recovery. This is a very vulnerable population. The risks may be a little higher than your typical group of volunteers. Luckily, they have only had one emergency situation happen since 2011.